Support for this episode comes from Edgepark. Life is busy and managing diabetes is a daily, sometimes hourly commitment. Well, Edgepark can help you say goodbye to the worry of managing your diabetes supplies with a variety of cutting-edge insulin delivery systems from brands like Medtronic and Tandem. Plus, Edgepark accepts most insurance plans and handles the paperwork, so you can simplify your life, your diabetes care, and your budget in one click. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Edgepark logo.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, I sat down with Dexcom CEO for an in-person interview at ADA Scientific Sessions. Dexcom made a little bit of news at the conference, but it's a less trumpeted replacement policy that had you all asking a lot of questions. We will go through the latest news, updates, sensor issues, and a peek into the future with Dexcom CEO Kevin Sayer. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Hello and welcome. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and I'm still digesting what happened at ADA. If you're not familiar, this is the American Diabetes Association Scientific Sessions Conference, probably the biggest diabetes conference that happens in the United States. And it's a blend of industry, pharma companies and healthcare providers and researchers. There's not a lot of consumer-facing stuff that happens here. This is not a conference where families go, where people with diabetes are, walking around asking questions. Although a little bit of that, I'll tell you about that in a second. I went as media, and there's a lot more to share. But I would say, and this is kind of my snap judgment at the moment, there's a lot of information, but I wouldn't say any big breakthroughs. Nothing that maybe you want to jump online and tell you before this regular podcast episode release. That doesn't mean nothing important happened. I will say the best wrap-up of the event happened the last night. There is an annual panel hosted by TCOYD and Diatribe Foundation, and it really puts things in perspective. Obviously, very, very few people attend that in person. I mean, it's a good crowd, but, relatively speaking, but they're going to be running it as an online event July 31st. So you can see what happened, listen to the conversations, and my understanding is that they're going to be hosting it and further commenting as they run it. So I will share that link when the link goes live. It is definitely worth your time. Again, that is at the end of July from TCOYD. And I mentioned patients at this event. There's a group called DDoC. I have talked about them and with them before. They are a patient advocacy group that started in Germany, and they have people from lots of countries now, and they are making sure that patients are represented at these big events. So that is very, very cool. And I'm going to try to catch up with them again soon because they had some big news expanding to other countries. And I'd love to know what they learned from ADA and what they think the big stories are. I mean, I think the big news for tech was that you could see the Sequel Twist pump in person. This is the pump that is powered by Tidepool software. I saw the Mobi again, Tandem's Mobi, and I learned how you fill it. It is pretty cool. The pump itself is basically the cartridge. I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but it really is so tiny. And then you just attach that cartridge to an insulin vial. There's a little filler piece, but I'm not exactly sure how I pictured this going here. It is very compact. It's really cool how they've been able to do this. In terms of Insulet, they announced at the beginning of ADA that Omnipod 5 is now compatible with the G7 and that you can now have full phone control from a compatible Android or iOS smartphone. However, for right now, the phone option is only available with the Dexcom G6. So to be clear, Dexcom G6 with Omnipod 5, full phone control, Omnipod 5 with Dexcom G7, you will still need a PDM. Okay, and finally, my usual disclaimer. Dexcom is a sponsor of this podcast. You hear me do commercials for them. However, our partnership in that does not extend to the interviews, so they don't tell me what to say or what to ask. Okay, on to my interview with Dexcom CEO Kevin Sayer right after this. Gvoke HypoPen is a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above. If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you're at risk for your blood sugar going too low. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready to treat very low blood sugar with Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more. Go to GvokeGlucagon.com/Stacey. That's GvokeGlucagon.com/STACEY. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on top of your kidneys called pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called insulinoma. Visit GvokeGlucagon.com/risk for safety information. Let's jump right in and start by talking about where things stand. And I know some new studies and information have come out in terms of the launch for the type 2 market, because last year at ADA is when you made the announcement.
Last year, we made the announcement that we were going to develop a product specifically for people with type 2 diabetes not on insulin. And then we set off on the journey to develop that product, or to finish development of that product, get it filed with the FDA and get it approved. What we didn't tell everybody last year is that we were going to go over the counter because it hadn't been determined yet. We felt we could get that through the agency, and we wanted to design a product that would be truly an over-the-counter experience for people, that would be that easy and intuitive to use. We filed that product in late December. We got approval literally in 75 days. So we're the first to get an over-the-counter CGM approved, another on our long list of firsts with the FDA. And we're thrilled to have got that done. At the same time, given this is our first shot at this, we want to make sure we're absolutely near perfection. And we probably won't be, but we're going to be as close as we can be. We're going to launch the product in late August. We're building a bunch of inventory up now. We want a launch that is rich with product so people can get it. We are going to distribute it initially through a online Dexcom platform, Stelo.com. And people will be able to go online and purchase it directly for cash, and it'll be shipped right to their house.
So walk me through that a little bit. It's in my head, I'm thinking over the counter. I go to my local, CVS, Walgreens, all of that. That's not how this will happen. You'll go online.
Not in the beginning. Not in the beginning. We wanted some control and some understanding of the type of customer that we were going to be attracting. Also, we don't have other products that sit on shelves in drugstores out there commercially yet. That'll be a new experience for us when we go to the brick and mortar model. But for right now, we felt the online store would be our best vehicle to get started. We can certainly have enough product to do that. And then by doing that, we'll also understand where our customers are coming from, what they're treating. We'll understand use cases and use patterns a little bit before we roll it out everywhere. We just wanted some understanding before we went. We have capacity to build, and we're very excited for that.
Take me through a little bit of the education process then and what it'll look like, because using a CGM is more simple than it was certainly than when my son started.
Much simpler. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the insertion alone is much simpler. But at the same time, I'm sure there are things that you'd like people who are beginning to use it to understand. Will there be instruction when they order it? Or is there a walkthrough on the app when they start using it?
Yeah, there's a definite walkthrough on the app when you start using it. There's also going to be educational tools, like there's an educational learning tab. One of the first tabs, I'm playing with an early prototype of the app right now. What is glucose? And then the second tab is, what does this mean? There's another tab, what is time and range? Because we have a time and range display. What does time and range mean? What should my time and range be if I have type 2 diabetes? And ultimately we'll get into nutritional tabs and learnings and things of that nature. But since this is an over-the-counter product, we're going to be very aggressive in finding out what features people love, what features people don't use a whole lot. And we've developed such a great software team that we'll be able to adapt this product and this app continually. Most consumers are used to an experience where apps upgrade pretty regularly, right? With G7, we've been upgrading G7 almost on a monthly basis since we launched it. We had a big launch earlier this summer with Apple, Direct Apple Watch, with the ingesting of, you can see your activity data. We've had some connectivity and Bluetooth enhancements. We have a medication logging module within the app now for our G-series users who might be on other meds. If they want to log their meds and see what effect the meds have, they can do that now. So we've been upgrading G7 regularly, and we're very happy with the app and how that's gone. Well, on the consumer side, it's going to be even more intense because it's a different group of people.
Yeah.
And it's a different use case. This is why, we were very thoughtful about this. Your son, who has type 1 diabetes, uses that glucose value all day long, every day to stay alive and to be healthy. The group of patients we're going to this first launch, particularly with type 2 diabetes or even prediabetes, they want to avoid the long-term things. It's not going to happen if Melissa gives me a candy bar and my blood sugar goes high and I just go high on a short-term basis. It does matter, though, if I eat them each and every day. So we want to educate and see trends. I'm not going to take more meds with the candy bar with type 2 diabetes, but it might be nice to see a trend from the candy bar. But that trend can't be, Kevin, moron, what did you eat yet again? It has to be, we notice this pattern is different today than it's been other days. Anything you want to talk about.
Right.
And this is where the app grows and develops over time. And so we're really looking forward to building that experience out. We're looking forward to figuring out what the business model is. There will be some people who will engage with it continually. There might be some people who engage with it intermittently. We don't know yet.
Yeah, it's
what we
interesting.
have seen in every study that we've done, type 2 patients never want to give them up. Once they have the sensor, they love it. In fact, I just had a physician in here one of my earlier meetings, and he said, I put all my GLP-1 users on sensors. And their comment to me is that sensor tells me that this drug works and I'm doing the right thing. This is the feedback loop I need to get healthy. And so Stelo is going to fit right into this space wonderfully.
Can I ask how much it's going to cost?
We haven't disclosed that yet.
Okay.
We'll have numerous pricing structures. Again, since it's a consumer product, we don't have to necessarily go by what we've done in the reimbursement world with payers. We'll have several pricing structures to get people engaged and involved.
Again, a little bit more in the weeds, and I'm sure as we get closer, we'll know more. Is this the kind of thing people can use their HSA, FSA, that kind of
Yes, they'll
stuff?
be able to use their HSA and their FSAs to get it, yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we'll definitely learn more about that as we get closer to it. You already mentioned Direct to Watch. Let's jump in. And I'm so excited to ask you this for the first time in a long time. When you've got the answer, it's done, it's out.
It's out.
It's out. Tell me a little bit about the rollout for it. Are all G7 sensors now
Yes.
compatible? Okay.
Every G7 sensor out there can go direct to watch. The app has been upgraded on the watch. It can accept all signals. So direct to watch is live and up for everybody.
Wonderful. It's so funny, Kevin, to ask you some of these things because my son is at the age now where I don't follow him. Like we're in a different part of life. So I don't have the same kind of hands-on experience in asking you these questions as I have in the past. So I'm kind of like, it's a little strange to be on the outside. But let me ask you more about Direct to Watch. Direct to Apple. Sure. Are there other devices coming for this kind of thing?
I would certainly see over time we go direct to other watch platforms. But Apple Watches are the predominant wearable platform of our product, so that was where we needed to and had to go first. We did not add the share. The share follow feature is not in the cellular watch yet. It's on the upgrade path. It will be coming soon. And we'll look at other devices where people will want to have a CGM experience. I mean, you can still get the data on other watch platforms, just not direct. You have to get it through the phone. The Apple Watch is by far and away the biggest one used in our user base. That's why we went there first.
Yeah. And again, we've talked about this before, but just to reiterate, the G7 goes to 3 devices.
Goes to 3 at the same time. It's the only device architected that way. We've spent a lot of time over the years trying to enhance our devices to make them as interoperable as possible. That's why we're the most connected CGM. So it can go to your pump, it can go to your phone, and go to your watch, all 3 at the same time. If you input something on the phone, the watch and the pump just upgrade in the cloud, and the display is the same. The data always syncs up.
Might be a dumb question, but I got a million dumb questions. Is the device, when we were talking about an insulin pump, if the device is compatible with a G7,
yes,
does it automatically fall into that category? In other words, can my watch, it goes to Tandem. We all know that, right?
It'll go to
Omnipod.
Yes, it'll go to Omnipod, watch, and phone or receiver. It'll go to 3 devices at the same time. With Omnipod, that signal actually goes directly to the pod that's on your body. So our signal goes there for their users, and then they take data into their app or into their controller. You can still connect with 2 other devices. You can still connect with the Dexcom app on the phone or the watch app. Either way.
In other words, as Dexcom becomes more compatible with newer devices or it moves forward that way, this wouldn't be any issue with the watch.
Nope.
Has nothing to do with it. It was just if we can go to that device, we go to that device. We still go to the watch.
But the data from the other device won't be on the watch.
You know, interoperability is really interesting because it's obviously not all things at once. Not everything is going to everything all at once.
No.
But I hear you. Before we leave direct to watch, because we have talked about it so much over the years, was there anything that you can look back to and say that was really what was so difficult about it? Because we've talked in the past about security, about charging, about people are sleeping and how do they...
Well, and that charging issue is still a one for a user. If that's my primary display and I've got to charge this every night, how's this going to affect alerts and alarms? We thought about that a lot. I think really it's been an engineering challenge more than anything else because the watches have changed and matured a lot over time, and that ecosystem is not the same as the phone ecosystem. And that's where most of our users were on the phone. So it took us a while to figure that out. I also think if you look at the maturation of our company on the software side in general, medical device companies are designed to make the best device they can. We don't start off making software experiences. And so we've had some new leaders and some new talent that have really enhanced our software capability over the last 2 or 3 years to whereby our software team is now a software team, not a medical device team. And it was really important we go through some of those changes internally to create those better experiences. And that's what Stelo will be, and G7 will continue to evolve the same way.
I go to a lot of podcasting conferences, and the big question they always have for me is, hey, or it's more of a statement really because they think they know, hey, isn't your glucose going to be in your Apple Watch any day now? Isn't Apple going to crack that code? And, of course, it's a lot more complicated than people think just having the watch measuring it. So I ask you, it's interesting, right? Because you're working with Apple on these kinds of things. Are you concerned about them as a competitor in the future? Right back to our conversation. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod. When you're deciding on a brand of insulin pump, there are a lot of things to think about, especially if you've never used a pump before. It can seem overwhelming. There are a lot of choices, and you want to make the right decision. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about Omnipod 5. Curious about trying an insulin pump or seeing what life without tubes is all about? Unlike traditional tubed pumps, you can try Omnipod without being locked into a 4-year contract. You might even be eligible for a free trial. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo for full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions. Also visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections.
Certainly, anybody would be concerned about Apple as a competitor. What we look at and the means we take to make sure we understand where this industry is, we look at all of these technologies that don't put a wire or a probe under your skin. We haven't seen anything that performs to the standards that would certainly not deliver insulin. And the FDA has been very strict about what they will approve from a device that displays a glucose number. Because somebody might deliver insulin from it. The ICGM standards are really tough. And Stelo complies with ICGM standards. So if an insulin user got it, even though it updates not as much and not as frequently and stuff, they still could dose insulin with it because it performs at the same level of accuracy. And so I don't know how that would be regulated. If we saw a non-invasive technology that were great, we'd certainly look at it and try and develop it. Don't kid yourself. I mean, we need to keep our eyes open. There's always somebody who's going to do something different and better than you someday. So we stay on top of it. But we haven't seen anything that would replace us. So time will tell.
Yeah. We mentioned Omnipod, now compatible with G7. That was one of the announcements. It's funny because it's hard to figure out what to ask about these kinds of things. You just kind of say, yes. But anything you'd like to share about the Omnipod integration?
No, we're really excited for it. All of our G7 users have been very happy. They're happy with the sensor. What our users don't understand, even our employees don't understand, when we launch a new product, you have to first sell it to one level of distribution, then another level of distribution, then it gets to the pharmacy, and there's X number of weeks at each of these places. And by the time you add it up, you think, hey, I've got a new yellow sensor today. It's 2 months later and everybody's not wearing yellow sensors. Why? Because everything is built up back there. So it takes a while for these things to happen. And so what Omnipod very carefully and very strategically did, they waited till their pod, every pod in their channel could receive that G7 signal. They wanted to make sure everybody had a good experience. And so they're very thoughtful in the implementation. I think it'll be a great system. And some people are still on G6, even with T-Slim and with Tandem. They've been happy with those results too. We're not hurting for G6 customers still. So we'll eventually phase out G6 with G7, but we want to make sure our users have the right product. So we're not doing that tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and I do have to ask, I assume it would be much like the previous iterations of the G series, where as long as the pumps are using them in other countries and people need them, you will continue to provide.
Yeah.
Because I know people get very nervous when you start talking about phasing them out. My son is still using the G6 just because he's a college student and he's like, I'll get around to it. And he just saw the endo, so he just got his G7.
Okay.
But he hasn't, I don't believe he has put it on yet. So
there
full
you go.
disclosure. Are there any other pump companies that you want to talk about today? I know there's always different partnerships.
You know, we work and talk with many insulin delivery companies. I think the most important ones for us today are those that are commercially selling the product. So Tandem and Insulet certainly are our pivotal relationships right now. There's a lot of our Dexcom users reside in those two companies. It's very important that we have the best possible experience with them.
With the twist coming from Sequel, I think it's this fall.
Yes.
Anything different about the way that works?
It's kind of a cross between several of the systems as far as being smaller and yet reusable, yet a disposable element. It'll be fun to watch and see how it goes.
One of the questions, I always ask my listeners, what do you want to know? And before the announcement...
You always have good questions in the what do you want to know section. It's always pretty fun.
I have great listeners. I have great, smart listeners. And I think you've probably already heard this weekend. It's a bit of a complaint and a question, but I'd like some clarification first.
Sure.
There was a lot of talk on social media recently about the change of what you're calling a goodwill supply of sensors. Can you first clarify the policy and if this is a change in terms of how many sensors Dexcom will replace when they fall off, when there's not when there's not a failure?
Sure. Let's start with failure mode. If sensors fail, we replace them, unquestioned. The policy that we released does not apply to that. And there's been some confusion that way. People have thought, well, we're not going to replace any of those. No, that's on us. We get that completely. We've never had a formal policy about replacing sensors that fall off. We went through our entire database. And, we have over 1 trillion data points of glucose data. We found that 95% of our users don't have more than 3 sensors that are reported for falling off. We wanted to make things as easy as possible for our user group. You get 3, no questions asked. Let's get it done. Let's get it over with. The question then becomes from the user group that's calling, well, what about, and what about, and what about? And there are numerous exceptions. You can talk with us about those. We certainly want to do what's right by our customers. At the same time, unlimited replacements isn't very fair to us as a business either. And it really shouldn't be the expectation on the other side. We'll find a proper balance. Whenever we do a policy like this, we put it in, then we analyze where it went. And we'll analyze it, we'll give it 90 days, 60 days, and see what happens. But there can be exceptions for people. One of the exceptions I've heard from a few people here, for example, if I have a procedure and have to take my sensor off for an MRI, is that my fault or is that yours? That's probably an example of something, okay, that's probably something we can change. But let's let the policy go for a few more days. We just wanted something in place that was more simple and put some boundaries around it. That's the thought behind it all.
So, again, I haven't replaced a sensor. That's Benny's responsibility these days, and I know when he needs to be...
That's got to be good for you.
Dude, it is the strangest thing after 17 years of this. It is good for me in some ways, but it also is a little nerve-wracking because is he replacing them? Is he doing what he's supposed to do? But I know he goes in the app and he'll fill out the form because every once in a while he does text me and say, like, how do I find my transmitter number again or things like that, But you have to put that all in. I guess to clarify then, if someone is really concerned that their sensors are falling off and they're not getting what they think they need, who would they call? Is it their local rep? Would they call
our tech support, tech support line. And one of the other things that triggered this and one of the other things related to this timing, we've recently launched a new patch on the G7 that is a stickier patch than our previous patch. But it's now, I told you how complicated it is to get all the old product out of the channel, all the new product in. It's now the majority of the product in the distribution channel, certainly the majority, and the majority of the product being used by our customers. So we have a stickier patch that we just implemented. We have a whole group that studies adhesives. There's a very fine balance between falling off too quickly causing allergies, being so sticky it peels off your skin, and being just right. We did a patch change with G6. We went from one to another that was stickier. We just done a patch change with G7. On the flip side, we can't have 5 patches in the drugstore because they can't stock that many sensors, and most users aren't going to go in and say, I would like patch 42. So we try and follow that balance. That's why we have the overpatch too, and we have some design and pattern overpatches that'll be available on our website for our users for G7 if they feel like they need more help there too.
I'd love to talk to the adhesive folks one of these days. I mean, it really has been such a journey.
It is a journey.
From the beginnings of all of these devices. You think about 20 years ago and how adhesives have changed. When you said you've changed the G7, and is that in all of them now that are out, or is that still rolling?
There's probably still some of the old adhesive within the distribution channel, and there's probably some with the old adhesive that people still have in their homes. But certainly by the end of September, it'll be all new adhesive patches.
I don't know if you can answer this. Aerodynamically, is there a change? Like G7 is a different shape, obviously, than G6. Does that change how sticky it is?
It changes pulling off, possibly, because you might catch the little under of G7 somewhere. But I think the shape makes G7 easier to stay on than G6.
Yeah.
At the same time, because G7 was so big, people were very paranoid about pulling it off, so they'd make sure they put a big old patch on. Whereas G7 looks so convenient, maybe they don't, and maybe they're thrilled not to. There are patients who wear G7 with no overpatch who do exceptionally well and get them all to last the time. There are others. I mean, again, skin and physiology, everybody's is different.
Yeah. I'm curious, too. Have you found over the years that there's a difference with kids versus adults?
Yeah, kids move more.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like
kids move more, and in the summer they jump in pools and they sweat and they play soccer and they play baseball. Kids move more.
And I think that's what the biggest concern I'm hearing is if my kid is having an active, wonderful life that Dexcom helps allow them to do.
Yeah, so we'll look at that.
Yeah, can I get more than 3?
We'll look into that.
Okay. It's interesting to talk about the database that you have because you do know so much about how your customers act and ask, when they ask for replacements and that sort of thing. It would be fun to do a deep dive one of these days into that. I know we can't do that today, or if you never let me. I'd love to know more about that.
You can do that with the engineers and some of the things that we know.
Well, because in terms of the amount of data from these, it must be kind of mind-blowing. That's a different story altogether, I suppose. All right, so you talked a little bit about eventually phasing out G6.
Yep.
I understand that there might be some information on G8. Anything you want to talk about yet? And never too soon.
Well, our biggest R&D effort in product development right now is to extend the life of G7 out to 15 days. We know that our patients rather have a longer life sensor. We have numerous technology changes that we're considering in doing that because we have a very high standard as far as reliability. While I say we want to replace all sensor failures, what we really want is no sensor failures.
Yeah.
As we look at going out to an extended life, our reliability standard needs to be met to do that. So we've got several different products and configurations in testing. That's the next big one. Combined with that, when you go out to 15 days, there will be a different algorithm to compute glucose values because the nature of that sensor changes in days 10 through 15 and a half versus what it is now. So that technology is being developed. We're working on that. With respect to G8, we're considering anything you could think of. The chemistry membranes of the sensor, the nature of the sensor itself, smaller form factor, but how small do you make it and still get the proper connectivity? Certainly sustainability is always on our list. G7 uses a lot less material than G6 did. We're pushing for another big reduction in materials that are used, at the same time keeping the product convenient and engaging for our customers. So that's a balance. And I'll give you the perfect example. The G6 with a transmitter, the G7 without.
Right.
The users don't want to deal with the transmitter. At the same time, we're throwing a battery away every 10 days instead of every 90 days. So what's the balance on these things? These are things we consider as we go through all of and that's another reason to go to 15 days. We've eliminated materials and we've eliminated batteries being thrown away by doing that.
We're going to run out of time in a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to ask, you mentioned the transmitter. That made me think, is there information you can share about the G6 with the transmitter, right? If a transmitter fails, then that's another issue. Is there data in terms of how much better the G7s are working in terms of fewer transmitter failures, that kind of thing compared? Is it apples to oranges?
It's apples to oranges because G6 transmitters go for a very long period of time. And G7's early in its launch. What we see with our curves and our product performance is you set the standard at one level, and then as the product gets out longer over time, we have definite reliability goals over the course of a year we expect to achieve. We monitor the error codes from our product. We have all sorts of systems in place where we go through those literally at least monthly and quarterly for sure for FDA purposes and our quality system purposes. And we monitor those things and we make sure those things are improving. We look at what isn't improving and then we try and fix it. And hence, the G7 first patch was good, but the second patch is much better. And that's a perfect example. Okay, we need to go stickier.
Got it. All right, last question. I'll bring it back to type 2.
All right.
You already mentioned pre-diabetic folks wearing this. What is your big vision? Do you think everybody who gets a diagnosis of prediabetes or type 2 should be wearing a CGM?
Oh, I have for a long time. Yeah. But I blew the room up at the JP Morgan Financial Conference several years ago when I said 85% of people on insulin should use CGM, and everybody looked at me like I was crazy. Well, that's not crazy anymore. We haven't hit that number yet, but we'll hit that number in our industry. I can't imagine managing insulin use without it. When I look at somebody who's battling metabolic health issues, the feedback you get from a CGM is unlike anything you've ever received before. You can see the direct implication of your eating habits. You can see the direct effects of exercise. You can see the direct effects of timing of your foods. You can see the direct effects of staging foods. You know, one of the things that I've learned in sensor use, if I sit down to breakfast and I'm going to have eggs and a bagel, if I eat the bagel first, my glucose goes really high. Yeah. If you eat the eggs first, it does not. You can't learn that without a CGM. So these types of insights we can provide people are going to make them healthier and happier. And the question is, how do I engage? How often do I engage? What app provides the best engagement? And what model produces the best economic and healthcare outcome for you? We're looking so forward to this. It's just going to be great.
And I said that was the last question, but I did have one more. I completely forgot.
Okay, you can do one more.
All right, I don't want to keep anybody waiting.
We're good. No.
Okay. There has been some talk recently of infusion set with CGM together. Now, I heard this secondhand that there's a company in another country developing this. I'm just curious, is Dexcom involved in anything like that you can share?
We've seen these projects over time. We have a sensor that we're trying to make last 15 days, and you change infusion sets every 3. So if it were economical and provide a better experience, we would consider it, but it's not high on the list for us.
And then also, we had talked years ago about ketone monitoring and other things like that. It's still looking into those things.
We have an advanced science group that's looking at monitoring several other substances and other platforms that we can incorporate. I think the key thing to note as you look at our R&D pipeline, particularly you asked me about Gen 8 features, one of the things, while G7 could accept other analytes and other things, with G8, one of the things we'll make more robust is the electronics platform. In addition to communicating with 3 things, how much memory it has, what size the processor is, and things of that nature. So we're designing that to be able to adapt to alternative analytes and more analytes much easier than G7 does right now.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've got lots more to talk about in the future, as always. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information about what we talked about over at diabetes-connections.com, as always. And I will be following up with Dexcom. There were a few issues there that I think we can revisit pretty quickly. I really want to know more about the over-the-counter rollout of Stelo. I'll be talking more about that on the Type 2 show for sure. But I don't know about you. I had thought that you'd be able to go into CVS or Walgreens and just pick it up, use it as a backup plan. Benny just switched over to the G7, my son, this week actually. And I was thinking, wow, this will be great because if he has a problem while he's away at school, he can just walk in and grab one. I wonder what the online ordering process will really look like. Will there be limits? Will there be different processes? And I put in a request to talk to Abbott. Their CGM is going to have an over-the-counter version as well. I wonder if it will be rolled out similarly through a website. If not, that is going to be really interesting to watch. Can't let you go without reminding you that registration is open for Mom's Night Out, Denver and Philadelphia. Both of those events are happening this fall. Our early bird specials are on for registration for both of those. You don't have to do anything. There's no promo codes needed. Just head on over to diabetes-connections.com, click on the Mom's Night Out tab, and you'll be taken right where you need to go. If you want a Mom's Night Out in your city, or you want to hear our announcements about future cities, 2025 will be here before we know it. There is a link to sign up for specific emails at that site as well. And I got to tell you, it was really cool to go to ADA where people know about Mom's Night Out. They're excited about Mom's Night Out. And some of the sponsors are stepping up their involvement in very unique ways, really tailored to these moms. They get it. I cannot wait for this fall. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
Benny has been using the Dexcom CGM for more than 10 years now. The first insertion was in 2013, just before he turned 9. It was great then. I mean, if you had done finger sticks for a while, you know how amazing it is to go from that to continuous glucose monitoring. But it's even better now. The Dexcom CGM systems just keep improving. They continue to get more and more accurate with no finger sticks or scanning required. The easy push-button insertion has made it easy for Benny to do it himself. He has done every one since we switched to the G6 in 2018, which was great for his independence back then as a younger teen. And of course, we still love the alerts and alarms and that we can set them how we want. Find out more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. If your glucose alerts and readings from the G6 do not match symptoms or expectations, use a blood glucose meter to make diabetes treatment decisions.